I want to welcome you to this evening's program, Minding the Gap, Art and Ecology Collide. I'm Renee Barrio, Head of Curatorial Affairs here at the McNay. And thanks you all for being here. It's great that we're able to do these programs back in person. This is the first time I've been back in this auditorium since before COVID, so it's really nice to be back. This evening, we're going to hear from an artist, Donald Moffett, and a scientist, Jennifer Smith, who are going to explore how their worlds overlap and give us some insight into the work they do. Donald Moffett, whose exhibition Nature Cult is on view upstairs through September 11th, is a native of San Antonio and a graduate of Trinity University. Donald is now based both in New York and in the Texas Hill Country. The McNay is delighted to welcome Donald back in this homecoming exhibition.
Glad to be here.
Jennifer Smith is a scientist and bird expert, originally from the UK and now here in San Antonio. Jennifer teaches and does her research at UTSA. So Jennifer and Donald are going to be finding common ground between the visual arts and the environmental sciences in an informational conversation, and it's going to be propelled by photographs that each of them have made. I'd like to note that the process for this whole project from the beginning has been very collaborative between the artists and the McNay, and so we also see this as a collaborative project between art and science tonight. Before I turn the conversation over to our guests, I just want to describe briefly the format we're going to use. So you see on the screen two photographs. The one on the left is by my colleague, Kate Carey, and the one on the right shows us this wounded owl that we found here on the McNay grounds. So what we've done is we've asked our presenters to give us photographs from their cell phone, and then we've paired up like this, and then we're going to propel the discussion to go forward. But they haven't seen these pairings, so there'll be a surprise to them as well. So there'll be these new kind of contextualization of their own photographs. I also want to say this program is being recorded, so it'll be available soon after this evening. And then finally, I want to thank the many funders who supported the exhibition, and in particular our local funders, Chuck and Ann Parrish. So we're going to go to the next slide, which is going to be the first pair, and I'm going to let Donald and Jennifer jump in.
Yeah, so this is set up as kind of like a trick for both of us. See what we can do with this. Okay, so what we decided was that we would at least describe briefly the slide we contributed. I contributed this slide on the right. It's a very simple shot of the ground, leaf litter, and a heavy frost up in Maine in the fall. And that's fundamentally, it just caught my attention, the still green fall foliage with the down leaves and the beautiful frost overlay.
That's a really cool image. Yeah, so to reiterate, we have no idea what these photos are going to be. But this is a cool shot. Makes me feel very seasonal, which kind of leads me into the picture that I chose here. And actually, I chose this because it follows on from a conversation that Donald and myself had about what we call gateway birds. And a gateway bird is the bird that got you into birding, something which caught your eye. For Donald?
The dead bird you just saw, the beautiful painted bunting, was my gateway bird. And not that many years ago, maybe I was just reminiscing 10 years ago. I didn't tell you this part. So I was up in the hill country. Some of y'all might know Concan, Texas, and Neil's there. It's famous old kind of resort cabins on the creek and on the Frio, and there were all these Brits around, and they were all very busy, and I'm like, well, what are y'all doing? And they said, well, we're birding. And I was like, really? Around here? Redbirds, mockingbirds. And to make a long story short, they said, why don't you go over there and just sit down a second? And I was like, well, what is it? And they said, it's a birding station. It sounded really official. It's a crummy little bench, little faucet dripping, and I was like, well, this is hardly religious. But I sat down, and a painted bunting within 5 seconds jumped out. And I had never seen that bird, and I was like, what, in Texas? And I was immediately hooked.
And so I didn't actually have a gateway bird, which is what you asked me a second ago. I had what my friend Kenny, who might be here, coined a gateway landscape. So this is actually my childhood home in the UK, where I started birding.
At what age? More or less.
More or less 7, 8.
Oh.
I don't remember a time when I didn't bird or have binoculars around me.
What kind of birds would you see in your backyard? Did you feed birds?
We did feed birds, a wide range of species that you don't get here. So probably actually going with this landscape, people think of UK cards at Christmas, right, the snowy scene with European robins. So, and then lots of species that are commonly related to the birds here too. So wide range of birds. And I was fortunate enough that I grew up on the edge of a national park, which meant we had access to lots of beautiful places and lots of really cool birds. Yeah.
We had access to, all Texans have access to beautiful birds. I was just too slow to know about them till I was about 50 or more.
I know that from your conversations, like just in the last few weeks when we've had conversations, would you say that birds is like the one place that you two intersect in terms of the environment and ecology, in terms of the natural world?
I think it's the easy overlap between us. I think.
In terms of our love and passion for birds.
Yeah.
And nature, for sure.
And just to bring it around, there's a handful of excellent birds in both Nature Cult and elsewhere. There's a Marsden Hartley painting in the Modernist show that will just knock you over. It's this huge dead bird. Anyway, but
Speaking of,
sorry.
There it is.
Yeah, so I can start off with talking about this. So this is me about 10 years ago, looking a little younger. And this project, so part of what I wanted to kind of bring to the table was how I use birds in research and showcase some of the different techniques that I use and also some of the different research questions that my lab poses. So this was looking at the effects of land use change on this beautiful raptor species, the crested caracara, which occurs as an isolated population in Florida, where I was at the time. And actually it occurs here. And you have them on the McNay. Is its feedback? Excellent. Is it good now?
It's good. I think
Perfect.
you're good.
So this is a really cool species because they actually have them on the grounds here at the McNay, which is another reason that I chose this picture. So here we're attaching what's known as a telemetry tag to crested caracaras so we can monitor their movements and understand how they use the landscape and understand how things like agriculture, for example, can change the ecology of the birds.
Now I see them in the hill country with vultures and with carrion.
Yes.
This is also another bird. I don't know if I didn't know this bird growing up. I don't know if it's changed its habitat. I mean, it's territory, but it's a exotic, big bird, like a vulture. But we've got turkey vultures and we've got black vultures. And then a few years ago, I was driving and I saw this really crazy bird. So if you haven't seen a caracara, it's C-A-R-A, isn't it?
Correct.
Look it up. It's amazing, and it's here. Did it change territories?
So this is something actually my lab are looking into right now and using kind of data collected by community members such as yourself if you do eBird or anything like that, and you can add your sightings to these online databases, and we're using that data to actually ask that question, and we definitely think they're moving north. We definitely think they're using urban areas more, which is kind of interesting in itself. So tell us about the bird on the left. I think I know what it is, but I'm kind of intrigued.
Oh, I don't. I don't know. I don't know what it is. But it's this big. It's still up in the galleries. I saw it this afternoon. It's in, the O'Keeffe show, and it's around the corner. Now, I looked at this bird. I don't know what this bird is. Do you?
Oh,
I think it's a duck.
I think it's a duck too.
Oh, sorry, thank you. Okay. There's some things which are a bit quirky about it, but I think it's an eider. Are there any?
You could be right.
If there's any other birders in the audience who are like, you're wrong, let me know. But I think it looks like an eider.
Well, it was probably painted in Maine, right?
Right.
It's obviously been shot, dead on a doornail. It's duck
that's
season.
What the red is.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, I don't think it's feathers. That might help your eider.
It kind of looks like an eider.
Yeah.
But the feet are also throwing me off. Anyway.
When you look at a painting of a bird like this, do you expect it to be accurate and realistic?
No, not at all. But I think that's just my, as a scientist, as a birder, I like to ID things. And so I think it's just automatic for me to kind of try to ID the species, but absolutely not at all should it be realistic. It should be on the artist. But I love the picture. I was just it resembles enough for an eider to make me think it's that. Yeah.
I think it could be. So probably about
my students in the audience. Sorry.
Somebody's pointing at a student. Oh, some of them are here and there?
Yeah. Hey, guys.
Describe what we're looking at.
Okay. So, one point, I'm going to probably talk quite a bit about my research tonight, and it's very important to me to make the point that I have a lab at UTSA. I do a lot of research. I also have a team. We are a team collectively who do the science and research in my lab at UTSA. Turns out that I don't have a photo of my entire lab group. We need to work on that, guys. But these are 3 of my students who joined me in the valley over spring break to go birding. So I want to shout out to all of them and thank you for just being rock stars, and also all my collaborators. I saw some up here who are also great people. But the second point of this is that it showcases the importance of Texas for birding. So this was 500 meters north of the border in Benson State Park. And everyone who's from Texas lives in Texas. It's the state with the second most birds species in the US. We have about 5% of the world's bird species occur in Texas. Which, if you think the size of the world compared to Texas, it's quite amazing.
The world is smaller than Texas, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
And so that's the second point of this picture, is just to say Texas is an amazing place for birds, and there's lots of different reasons for that as well. It's a very exciting place to do research.
Is that on the Rio Grande?
That's right above the Rio Grande, yeah. Yeah.
I haven't made it there yet, but I hear it's just fantastic.
This time of year is very good.
Who's got number 1 spot?
California.
Oh. There's that old rivalry again.
But the other thing about California is it's big and it's got a lot of coastline, which goes from south to north, which automatically means that the diversity is going to be, the range in bird species is going to be pretty big across that geographic scale. Exactly. If you think about all the different habitats, and it counts seabirds. Mm-hmm. So that's why California has the highest number. Yeah. Yeah.
I thought so too.
Donald, tell us about your photograph.
Yeah, tell us about
your
photograph. Bumper sticker. That's awesome.
I didn't quite think out of it actually seeing this in front of people. It was a car on my street in New York, and I hadn't seen this bumper sticker. It seems like, it looks ancient, but I really hadn't seen it, and it's something I have been thinking about, and it is an appropriate moment to spill it out, and that is, I honestly think it's time to kind of reprioritize, kind of go back on our manifest destiny idea that people are it, that we're top and everything else kind of falls under that, certainly, and it's of less importance and significance. And so I kind of like this. It's not exactly true, but it could be true. And and you know, I kind of, well, here's another way to say it. I put animals and my friends on the same plane. So, or even, you know, animals, a little higher. But that's why that's there. I think we've got to do a little rebalancing.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Yeah. I was going to say, I've seen an image thinking about that car sticker where we have all different animals and people kind of randomly spaced within a circle, right? So it's not this pyramid where humans are at the top, but rather we all coexist together. And I think it's probably the way it should be.
I do too. So y'all might be wondering about now, it's like, okay, what are we doing here in relationship to the museum? I was going to maybe jump in there just a little bit. I think artists, art, and scientists and their work need each other. I think we're both kind of working hard on a lot of significant issues, but there seems like there's been it wasn't always this way. Science and art really has a history, an ancient history. But there's been kind of an estrangement, it seems like, for too long. And so here we are, trying to find the smallest little bridge of our two worlds. And
do you think it's easier for artists to bridge into science over scientists bridging into the art world?
We're going to find out. We're going to find
what do you
out
think?
Right here.
In your dabbling in the art world.
So it's an interesting question. I'm trying to think of whether I'm answering this question as a scientist or as a birder. I think there's a lot of art in the natural world. Like we look at, for example, let's look at that bluebird on that book. I mean, it's beautiful. There's so many colorations, you know. And in terms of, I don't know if you're asking if science can inform art. I think it certainly can.
Inform art.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I spend most of my time reading that kind of book, you know, which is hardly an art book because of what it's so generous.
Yeah.
Who shot Sue's here? Who took which picture?
Mine's the Talame book.
Mine's the bird feeder.
Let's hear about the feeder.
The feeder. So, yeah, this is a great way to interact with birds, right? I don't know how many people have bird feeders in their backyards. A bunch. Very cool. So do I. So a lot of my research is based on looking at the effects of backyard bird feeding on birds. And so I spend a lot of time, actually, I should say my students spend a lot of time. I did my PhD on backyard bird feeding. And so we spend a lot of time at bird feeders asking questions about how bird feeding affects birds, and more recently here in San Antonio. So that's why this picture is in here. It also reminds me of this was taken on a place called Buck Island Ranch in Florida, where I was stationed for a couple of years. It's a 10,000-acre working cattle ranch. And I moved there from Birmingham, UK, which is the second biggest city in the UK. So crazy urban bustle to a 10,000-acre cattle ranch, which was an interesting transition.
Loneliness.
Yeah, I loved it. And I think, you know, not only does this remind me of my research, but also just a place and time that I enjoyed and had a really good experience at. And yeah, connected with nature a lot.
I think all of us who have bird feeders probably know that it's there's controversy involved in it. So we're looking to you tonight to give us the answers of what, when, how. No.
What's the controversy of bird feeders?
I can jump in, but you're the...
I can guess what the controversy... Basically, I get asked these questions a lot. Should we feed garden birds? Which isn't a binary response, in my opinion.
Which is a what?
It isn't a yes or no thing for me.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of controversy due to the potential effects that it has on birds. And so I get asked that pretty much every time I give a public talk about feeding birds.
Here I am.
Yeah, no, it's great. But even though I've been working on garden bird feeding since like 2007, I still haven't got a perfect answer.
Well, I was wondering, because I'm feeding birds like crazy because it's incredibly dry in the western, above Uvalde. We haven't gotten any of this rain that you've had in the last few weeks, just nothing. The grass is incredibly dry. I'm like, these birds are trying to breed. They're trying to build nests. It seems like a good time to feed. So I am.
Right, and let me ask you another question. When you feed birds, do you feel connected to nature?
Well.
And why do you feed birds?
Well, I feed birds because I like birds, and I like to eat. You know, it brings them right in, so you get to see a lot of great birds. So yes, it makes me very connected to birds.
Does it make you happy?
Absolutely.
Right.
But you know, that's different from bird happy. Like,
how do we know?
Good point. I certainly don't.
But that, to my point, is a really big benefit of backyard bird feeding. It is one of the best ways to connect people from all kind of different backgrounds. Whether you're mobile or you can go out birding, you can usually have a bird feeder in your backyard, which can connect people to nature. And there's lots of published research to show that it has positive benefits on human well-being, mental health. And so there's a really positive thing, right? And so people ask me as a scientist, is it good or bad? But I can't ignore the fact that it has great impacts on people. And I think, especially in urban areas, we're becoming closer to wildlife and we're interacting more. So I don't think you can take that human component out of the question. But whether or not it has ecological impacts on birds is another question, which is a complex answer.
Okay.
Yes. And we can't say whether it's good or bad. I think the big thing, so I had a student graduate last week who looked at the effects on abundance and diversity of birds in backyards, and we showed that it increased abundance. And potentially diversity too. So you put a bird feeder out, you're going to get more birds in your backyard, right? Which is good. And then what does it do for things like survival and breeding productivity? So number of babies they produce. It's really variable across studies. So there's not any solid conclusion. What we do know is that there's a potential for bird feeders to spread disease because it's a central hub for birds. So I would not say don't feed birds, but if you do feed birds, because it brings connection to humans, right, which is positive. Clean your bird feeders on a weekly basis.
Even seed dispensers.
Yes, on a weekly.
Once a
hot
week.
Water. Yes.
Oh, I'm spreading disease up there.
Yeah.
Well, look, here, I can be a little specific. I know we're maybe getting a little down in the weeds, but it seems like it's okay. So in the spring, everything starts showing up that's supposed to, and then the blackbirds, the brown-headed blackbirds show up, which are a parasitic...
Brown-headed cowbirds,
yeah,
yes.
You
They're
can
in there.
say it. Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah.
Which ones are those?
Okay, so...
Right.
So Donald is speaking about a species which is known as a parasite. So they lay their eggs in other species' nests. And so there's 3 species represented here. The big one at the back is a grackle. So you might have seen those in the HEB car lots.
Yeah.
And then we've got a red-winged blackbird in the bottom right-hand corner. And then pretty much the rest are brown-headed cowbirds. The lighter ones are the females, and the darker ones are the males.
And they're beautiful.
They are actually really beautiful.
They're very beautiful.
They're just increasing in numbers and having potentially bad impacts on songbirds.
Yeah.
Like golden cheek warblers, which are an endangered species.
So what they do, and from what I understand, is that it used to be cool when the buffalo were running, because they would pop their eggs in other birds' nests and then travel on. And so, that was their gig. They were like, pretty crummy parents. They just drop them and leave them. And they also grow, they hatch early, they grow early, yeah, I don't know, they grow big. I've seen videos of them pushing their step brothers and sisters out of the nest. It's pretty gruesome. But, you know, this is their evolutionary bidding. But now they just come and stay. Mm-hmm. They don't travel. There's no herds to travel with. Mm-hmm. And so it's a little bit of a complex issue.
It is, yes. And it's a demise of the bison, which is primarily affected their ecology for sure, which is sad. Yeah.
Do you think that bird watching has affected the way you make your work? Has affected your art?
Oh, you're going to bring it back to art. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's a problem, which is why we're sitting here trying to figure this out just a little bit. Because it's not in the academic language at this point. Landscape, this type of thing is a historical way of making art for the most part, at least in terms of contemporary rhetoric. I would hope that this show, this conversation, and our ongoing efforts would reconnect, reinvent a language that is appropriate to our day around nature, birds, science, and making art. Stun the crowd.
Oh,
I know, there's like, you know, it's a time of new language, I think, which we hit all the time. I've been part of them in my long career where, you know, things roll out. And this is just a hope, you know, that somewhere between environmental problems, climate change and those problems, and art with its heady, capable voice can play a role. Here we are.
I love this Texas dragonflies. This is really cool. This is kind of like the artwork that I have on my walls.
So do I.
Right, which is inspired by nature, really significantly, right? So tell me, like where that came from and more about it.
There's a wonderful. It's called Natives of Texas in Kerrville. It's a native plant nursery that's really special. And he had this poster in his office where he takes all your money. And I saw it and I was like, David, that's the greatest poster. How can you get it? Can't get them. They're not available. Can't get it. It's like, oh, that's too bad. I really love that poster. So I went home, Googled it, $24. You know. So they're available. Anyway, it is a wonderful poster. And those dang Texas dragonflies, they'll really give you art, you know.
Yeah,
They'll
absolutely.
give you a lot to work with. And yours, what do we have here?
So actually, I'm excited about talking about this one. So actually, before all of you came in, Donald and I were talking about what school you used to go to. Where did you used to go to school?
You mean high school?
Middle school.
Oh, Longfellow.
So this is actually Longfellow School.
Wow.
Yeah,
Great.
isn't that cool?
That is super cool.
Yeah, and so I wanted, so my research isn't just on birds, a big emphasis on human dimensions, engaging students in nature. And this photo is of a really cool project that I'm doing with some people in the room here today called Urban Bird Project. And we have money through the USDA, which intersects avian ecology, so myself, and then culturally responsive teaching through Indigenous studies, Mexican American studies, and then community science. And so we're working with 6th and 7th graders from Longfellow,
wow.
Woodlawn Academy, and YWA. And it's a really cool project. And this is us out taking those students birding. And it kind of actually connects with art because we're also introducing birds through art too. which we.
You mean you're bringing images of art?
No, actually, one of my collaborators here, Emilio, is Dr. King Kostelak, is doing some artwork with them, so you can talk to her afterwards. But we're running that this week, and yeah, we've got prints. They're making the prints from blocks and things like that.
You mean
transfer
transfer
I'm trying
drawings?
to think of the word. It's just like gone out of my head.
Wood blocks.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Good.
So we're not only talking about, as I said, we have experts in Indigenous and Mexican American studies, myself as an avian ecologist, and then folk who are expert in community science and then art as well. And so we're intersecting all these different ways that you can look at birds in an after-school club called Urban Bird Project. So it's not, you don't have to be a scientist to be interested in birds. We're integrating kind of nature and birds in all kind of different avenues with an aim to engage those students in nature and become more interested in science and birds through these different avenues. So, yeah.
Love that.
If you wanted to, I think after tonight, everyone's going to want to be bird watchers. So,
hope so.
How do you get started?
That's a good. Oh, you just lost her.
Oh no, that's all right.
Well, you would know. You teach people how to get started.
Well, for me, it was grabbing my father's pair of binoculars on the kitchen dining room table. I don't know what makes someone predisposed to liking birds. I mean, I was really young. My parents aren't nature people. My sister's not, but for some reason I was, and I don't know why. But I think a lot of it was me just being out in the wild. As I said, I grew up on the edge of a national park, and the place was abundant with birds. And birds are everywhere; they're really visible. And how can you not love birds? And I think that's what got me into it. And there's so many opportunities for people to bird, as you know. You don't have to buy expensive equipment. You can go to some places, Mitchell Lake, Audubon, etc., which I know are doing an event with you soon. And they'll lend you out binoculars, right? And so there's lots of ways to get into it. There's lots of community organisations.
There are, and I mean the big one is Audubon.
Right.
Audubon is a national organization. There's here in San Antonio. They do a lot of wonderful programming. What happened to me here in Texas? I went home to New York, and I asked myself that question. It's like, okay, I'm suddenly crazy about a bird. Now what do I do? And so it was, you poke around, and I found Audubon New York, and as we were also talking before this, which you might or might not know, depending on your interest in birds, is Central Park, the huge park in the middle of Manhattan, is one of the greatest birding places anywhere, because all the birds are migrating from the south, from Central America, South America, up the coast. It gets so dense that they see this, it's not big by Texas standards, but it's 1,000 acres in the middle of all this urban horror, and they're like, oh, and they fall into the park, and it's great, great, great birding. Just all kinds of incredible birds. So, come to New York, come to Central Park. No, it's much simpler than that. We've got great birding here. I haven't been to Mitchell Lake, but a couple of friends were in from New York for this opening, and they went birding. And they went there, and they said it was fantastic, and they only had allowed a morning, and they said we could have stayed.
And I understand there are a lot of species here on our campus, right?
There are. Yes.
Yeah.
Like how many?
Oh, I don't know. I think we did a survey for you. I forget how many
heard
birds.
like 20-something.
I think on the survey that my student and myself did, I think we got 20-something, but that was just one morning, so I guarantee there's a lot more species than that. But it was a good place for birds.
We did birding here the day after the opening, and we had a local scientist join us, and we found 30 birds on that morning. I mean, it was a little later in the spring.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. That's way good. It's really good. So you can do it right here.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, I noticed most all your photographs have people in them.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're doing science.
We're doing science. A lot of reasons for that. As I said, I'm an avian ecologist. I work in urban systems. We can't get away from the fact that there's a lot of people in urban systems. They're part of the system in terms of how we're affecting wildlife. We need to, in my opinion, increase things like nature engagement, so they're part of the equation of what I do. And then, secondly, it's not just me, right, who does this science. I have a wonderful team of people around me who help me succeed. One student here, this is Lauren, who's sat over there. And we are banding, so putting small bands, so bracelets, on the legs of northern cardinals, and we're also fitting them with very small transmitters, which are less than 2% of the body weight. They have no effect on those birds. So we can look at the movements of these birds around actually the Longfellow area. And so this is part of the Urban Bird project that we're doing with the 6th, 7th graders at those 3 schools. Yeah.
And the objective there, I can only kind of translate this from the ongoing projects of that Kate is the pro at, is like getting people interested in art. So getting people interested in nature, for what, for where, what's the outcome? To protect nature? Or?
It's all kinds of, I mean, I think there's all kinds of good potential long-term impacts. One of them for the grant as written is to increase retention and recruitment of minoritized students into STEM education, so science, technology, engineering, and math, which there's lots of barriers to participating into those subjects, especially from minoritized communities. So that's one big aim, and then also to increase awareness of the global issues caused by us, caused by humans on wildlife. And then, getting out, getting exercise, enjoying nature as we do as well. So I think there's lots of different benefits for being involved. Yeah, for sure.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Hopefully, yeah.
Good work.
It's a cool project for sure. Yeah.
How many people do you come in, how many young people do you impact, or come in contact with?
Great question. So routinely at Urban Bird Club, at the 3 different schools each, we have about 10, 15 students. We've also done trips to Mitchell Lake where we had, I forget how many students, but 20, 30 students. And then, we have some transition through the different times, maybe sometimes one semester, some students can come and then it switches to next semester, but yeah. And then this is a 3-year project. So this is year 1 of going into school. And we're seeking more money to continue this project. So hopefully lots of students overall. Yeah.
And are you, not to be too binary, but young men, young women equal, or how's that kind of playing out?
That's a great question. Guys, do we know that?
Is
Equal,
it about
probably.
equal?
Yeah, so the reason I looked at my colleagues here is because I'm working, so the school at which I'm working the most is YWLA, which is Young Women's Leadership Academy. So the class that I teach is female.
All women, yeah.
Whereas I know at the other schools, it's a mix of gender identities.
Cool.
For sure.
Great.
Yeah. So this photo doesn't look like the hill country.
It's not. Good guess. Further west. I hadn't been out to far West Texas in decades, and so we just went out there. And this is Ocotillo, which is all over the place, and it was just coming into bloom, and it was so busy with insects and everything. And I just thought it's like my gateway cactus. So, it drew, I thought it was very artistic, frankly.
I love it, yeah.
Do hummingbirds, would you know? It seemed kind of hummingbird-like.
I could predict a lot of hummingbirds are attracted to red flowers.
Yeah.
So I think it would be a good guess for sure. So, has this picture informed any of your artwork? Because I think it's absolutely beautiful. I love like the contrast between the colours and things like that, and the different background compared to here. And so, yeah, this just seems like a...
It's a brand new picture, you know, within the last few weeks, and sometimes this machine, it works extremely slowly, but I could hope so.
Yeah.
I like the picture too, that's why
I think it's really cool.
put it there.
I actually do some research out in the desert southwest too, and you know, when I'm down there, I'm actually working on crayfish, which is another story. And when I'm out there, I love the desert, and actually one thing which, you know, I'm really drawn to are the plants. And I'm not a plant person at all. I know nothing about plants, but they're pretty spectacular out there. So this is a pretty cool picture.
This was in Terlingua. Oh, now we're
here we are.
Now we're getting somewhere.
I'm so excited.
That's what you were talking about earlier, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So jump in.
So am I talking about my picture or your picture?
Oh, your picture.
Okay.
Let's kind of ID them.
Okay. So, bird building collisions. It's a huge impact on birds. So estimates suggest that approximately 500 million, potentially anywhere up to 1 billion birds are killed in the lower 48 every year by bird building collisions. So just remember that number, like up to just under 1 billion birds every single year. And so some of the research we're doing in my lab is looking at this, and also using them as a way to look at contaminants, specifically microplastics in birds. So this bird was, this died on UTSA campus, unfortunately.
What is that beautiful bird?
It's a western meadowlark.
Wow, that's a big loss.
Which is absolutely beautiful. It's a declining species anyways, so it's kind of sad to see. It's so beautiful. Yeah. So it's sad.
So wait, can we go back to the microplastics?
Sure.
And how did those two come together?
Sure. So there's one question we can ask here about bird building collisions, but if I believe in using, if I've got a bird in the hand, then I want to use it to explore other questions. And so microplastics are a human-caused contaminant in the environment. And so what the lab is doing is we're dissecting them, taking the guts out, and then looking at exposure of those birds to microplastics by finding microplastics in their systems.
So it doesn't have anything to do with the collision specifically. It's like you've got a dead bird in your hand.
Exactly. But that's an interesting question, though. It's an interesting question because we don't know much about microplastics and terrestrial birds, but you could hypothesize that chemicals associated with microplastics could affect them in some way, which could make them predisposed to collisions. I will put the caveat there, that is just a thought in my head. That's never been tested. No one has any evidence of that, but it's definitely something that you could.
No, the takeaway is microplastics are bad.
Yeah.
Birds hitting windows is bad.
And they're both human
causes. They're both, yep, we did it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Humans. So we spoke about bird guides before everyone entered the room, and this is something that when Renee and myself walked around, this immediately sprung to my attention. So
this is in the show, and it was kind of this, when I fell for birds, I fell hard. And this, living in New York, you know, we do have these art auctions, which are kind of generate national and international business news, art news, money news, you know. And so I happened to see this at an auction, and it's one of the great guides, field guides, I don't know what you use, but I just fell in with the Peterson guides, which you might know them. There's now all kinds of guides. Peterson but Roger Torrey Peterson was a real person and a real artist Maybe died in the 70s or 80s, something. Yeah. Not that long ago, not too long ago. And anyway, he was a great artist. And this is a working mechanical. Anybody who's old enough to recognize a mechanical with the registration marks and everything. This is a gouache by Peterson of Mexican quail, all in position, ready to go to the printer. So it's a super fine piece of art, in my opinion. And it's in the Nature Cult show. Anyway, I was able to get it at auction. They've gone crazy now. I was able to get kind of a good deal, but now they're very collectible and they're hard to get. But anyway, so then I immediately, went and searched the bird guide that this is in, and it's in a beautiful little. Is that in the show? Did I bring it?
No, I don't think so.
Beautiful Mexican bird, Roger Torrey Peterson Mexican bird guide on like page 247. This is reproduced as the Mexican quail.
And in this case, Jennifer, you would expect this to be an accurate depiction of that bird, right?
Yes.
It's not an interpretation.
No, because
it has a different purpose.
Exactly, yes.
It's an illustration. And he was immensely talented. And what you're not seeing is what we kept on the back of the framing in a pocket is the overlays. And the Peterson guides are known for, in fact, he invented this, he would stick an arrow at what was most kind of identifiable about the bird you were looking at or trying to see or trying to identify. And so this came with the acetate overlay, with the arrows that indicate each of these, and with the tissue overlay with the printing instructions. But that was his big thing, which I still go with. A lot of people, there's like 3 or 4 big bird guides. What bird guide do you use?
So I do have a Peterson, but I use primarily Sibley.
Everybody does. I love Peterson.
They're both good.
They are both good.
I am absolutely jealous that you have this.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
I can see potential overlap here, actually. So was this a COVID activity?
It has become known as a COVID activity, but it was actually a little.
Mine was.
Yours was.
Kinda.
Oh, all right. Well, that's just a loaf of bread. Again, I didn't quite think this through. It's a beautiful loaf of bread, but I don't know exactly. Well, here it is. It was very scientific making bread.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of science to baking, for sure. So I take it we both like bread.
Yeah. If you do, I do. I mean, okay, what is this?
So most of the time I spend out in the field watching birds, tagging birds, etc. On occasion, I'm in the lab with a lab coat on, which, typically that's what people think of as scientists. Mm-hmm. It's not accurate, but sometimes I do play that role. And so this actually goes on from that meadowlark picture I showed. So this is actually filtering guts of birds to retain microplastics. And so this was something that I started during COVID. So I guess in a way it was kind of a COVID activity.
It was like baking bread. What did you find?
We have not analysed the filters yet, so we don't know.
Okay.
Is the bottom answer. But watch this space. Hopefully, in a year or so, we'll be able to tell.
But you know this to be an issue because it's kind of like a cross fauna, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like trouble with microplastics.
Yeah. So this is an interesting question. We know so most work has been done in marine systems because of the prevalence of plastics in marine systems. Yeah. So we know that approximately 80% of seabirds that have been surveyed for microplastics have had microplastics in their gut. So a microplastic is any piece of plastic fragment which is less than 5 millimeters in length. And so we don't know much about terrestrial birds, but we know they're very prevalent in marine systems. And so now we're beginning to answer those questions. So they can cause lots of different things. The immediate one, if you have a lot of plastic in your gut, can you imagine what that might feel like? Pretty bad, right? And so it blocks guts. It can have detrimental effects on things like survival. We know that these microplastics are also associated with chemicals, which have been shown to leach, to move into the tissues.
It's made from petrol. I mean, it's made from petroleum.
There's a lot of organic chemicals,
It's like
for sure.
drinking motor oil.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Maybe.
No, it's speculative. It hasn't
It's
been
speculative.
proven.
Yeah. There's so many ideas coming out tonight that we need to test. But yeah, so this is just kind of like, I guess, showing the other side of some things that I do.
And Donald as well.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, for sure,
but I
exactly.
can also say, like, that photograph, your photograph, that is art. That is quite fine.
I'm looking forward to the piece that might come out of it. Like, So I think, am I correct in thinking that I saw this piece of coral next to the cocoa brain? Hang on, what was it called?
Yeah, the brain. It's
brain
it's colloquial known as brain coral.
Yeah.
Dead. There's kind of a coral theme that runs through that. Dead coral theme that runs through that show. But yeah, that's brain coral.
So what inspired? So what is it about coral? Like, where did you first see it? Was it in situ? Was it in a book? What kind of brought your attention to coral?
You know what? That's kind of interesting because coral in the ocean is so spectacularly beautiful that I went snorkeling once down in Anguilla, and it just blows your mind like that. And it was just like the painted bunting. It was like, who knew? You stick your head in the water with a snorkel, and all this is going on. So it was just one of those awe-inspiring moments that one hopes for in a lifetime,
Yeah, for sure.
And so this one came our way. It's always in our house, and it's always been compelling, and I'm sure it led me to think about the cross-section of the brain that became that piece. And then for the first time, we've put them together here in this show. It was just as this show unspooled, unfolded. There was coral in every gallery, it felt like. And so we decided it should sit with the brain piece.
So kind of a question going on from that. So your exhibit has the words nature cult in it. So why did you call it nature cult?
It's a good club. It's a really good club, this cult. I don't know. There's such a negative connotation around cult, and it's always for all the wrong reasons. And in my mind, in everybody's mind, isn't it? More or less. But this one is different. And but I thought the intensity of what you always kind of read about in cults is demanded as we turn our attention to nature and its preservation and conservation.
Cool. Yeah. And so how did the cocoa brain fit into it? Was it because it was inspired by this, or was it inspired by the name Nature Cult? Like, why did you choose? Because it's one of my favorite pieces in the exhibit, so I was wondering why you chose it.
Well, the piece came before the title of the show. I'm stuck. Your question was...
Why?
Why the brain?
Yeah.
Why the brain? Why not the brain? The brain's in a little bit of trouble, and that's why it's chocolate, and that's why it's cocoa brain. We have trouble in the brain, the human brain. We're off track. We're pretty off track. Anyway, it's a absurd piece, an absurd showing of a cross-section of the brain.
That's very cool.
Next to this incredible thing. So, what do we have here?
So, this is a little graphic, so sorry. This is a piece of liver from a barred owl that my student Eris, who I think is up the back, who's continued to do a project looking at the effects of rat poison on birds of prey.
Yeah.
So one thing that Eris is doing is collecting liver samples from birds that have been, which have passed at Last Chance Forever here in San Antonio and another bird facility here in Texas. And so that's given us the opportunity to look at how many birds that we're sampling are exposed. So I think the data at the moment suggests about 50% of barred owls that we're sampling here in San Antonio have been exposed at some point to rat poison, rodenticide.
So they're picking up dead rats?
They are.
Most likely?
They are. And so we often think about putting rat poisons out to control rats and rodents. It certainly does. But what we often don't think about is the potential indirect effects that can have on predators, such as barred owls. So owls will consume those rats and mice because when you give rodenticides to rats and mice, slows them down. It's internal bleeding, they become sluggish, and therefore they are easy to pick off for owls and other raptors too. And so we don't know too much about this in Texas or in urban environments. So that's kind of how this project came to fruition. But yes, we're learning a lot from this project, but it's definitely a sad phenomenon. Yeah.
We have our last pair here.
Yeah.
Hey,
Ha!
look at that.
Where's your picture taken?
That's the Pecos River as you travel out 90 out west. Sure. They've since I was there last, which was 100 years ago, they've added this great kind of picnic thing way up here. So this is, you take a little exit, come up here, and you look back at the bridge, which I had really looked forward to crossing the Pecos again because it's so impressive. And there were two reasons why I included this, because what we haven't got to is I've mentioned the drought just 100 miles from here, but everything out west looked so parched and so burnt. And it's spring, and it can either be incredibly luscious with the least amount of moisture, the bloom can be unbelievable, or it can be everything in between. But right now it looks parched and half dead. Let's hope for the best. But the river's still flowing. So this is more optimistic over here.
I don't know. No, it is.
On the surface.
It is. So, so another piece of research that I did as a postdoc, 8 years ago, was looking at the potential effects of wind farms on greater prairie chickens. So the greater prairie chicken is a species up in Nebraska. You have lesser prairie chickens here, which is a listed species. And so we often think about turbines killing birds through direct mortality, right? So birds collide with them. I will point out now that we spoke about bird building collisions, right, being potentially up to 1 billion birds in the lower 48. So wind turbines are expected to kill more around anywhere between 200,000 to 500,000. So whilst there is an impact, it's nowhere near other human-caused things. But one thing we're interested in is, well, does it have what we call indirect impacts? Does it affect, for example, the behavior of birds or their movements and things like that? And so this was me sat in a blind on a cold Nebraska morning, really cold, trying to trap prairie chickens, probably without much success. And I just thought it was like a really cool, iconic shot of prairie chickens with a really modified landscape in the back. And that's where the photo came from.
Well, but the prairie chickens they're getting more electricity, obviously. But what's the effect? Is there effect? They're getting free electricity.
Prairie chickens are getting free electricity. I love it. Why have I never thought of this as like a newspaper title?
No. But is there an effect there?
So,
a behavioral effect?
So what we found on this specific project, and I remember that when we report these findings, they're often species and site specific. So what we found at this site doesn't necessarily mean it happens everywhere, right? But in the context of this wind farm, we found that, so male greater prairie chickens, as you might know, perform these really mad, elaborate displays. We can see one here, it has orange air sacs. They inflate them, they stick up their pinnae feathers, and they do like these little kind of dances for the females.
Like this out here.
When you go home, have a look at prairie chicken dances. They're awesome.
They work.
They do. And actually, they've been represented in art many, many times, especially by indigenous cultures up in the Great Plains. So what we found was males spend more time doing this display, what we call booming, nearer turbines compared to further away. We found it had no effect on survival, and we showed it had no effect on movement. Either.
What about reproduction?
So we found no effect on reproduction either.
Really?
But as I said, context is specific. There have been findings from other studies which have found the opposite effect.
I just want to point out to Donald, in homage to one of your walls upstairs, we brought the horizon line together through your two photographs.
Nice. Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So tell me about these pictures.
They're not mine.
This is. I guess we're wrapping it up.
We're wrapping it up.
Well, these are both my pictures. That's Bob Gober with a very sour apple. And then this is in the hill country that I just loved because it's in the middle of a creek and that little plant has found its place and it's growing in that little rock in the middle of the creek. Wish it well. The statement is the best I could do. As you can tell, the nature cult is still trying to get off the ground. It's fictitious, yet powerful. The luxury of art is a component of the absurd. So I went there. That's all and this is part of the paper, part of the broadsheet that we made.
So I was going to ask one last question. What are your next steps in progressing the nature cult?
I'll go wherever it wants to go. Whoever wants to join, the fees are very reasonable. I did a double take. I thought you had put my email up there. No, this will roll out. It's just of mine, and we'll see where it goes.
Very cool.
Great. I see we're at time, so I want to thank you both. We've learned so much of us doing different things tonight.
Right.
I want to thank everybody for being here.
Thank you.
I really appreciate
Thanks.
this.